The Unitarian Fellowship of Newark, Delaware builds a church. This is Dick Peterson, president of the fellowship at the time of the construction. John Mumma, chairman of the building committee and virtual designer of the structure. Our architect was Mr. Fox. 101 Seifert Drive in Oaklands was the fellowship home for almost 4 years. Following temporary quarters in 2 schools, the YMCA, and a private house. At 101 Seifert Drive, we had a very pleasant meeting room. It was all mahogany paneled, and it served our needs very well indeed. At least it did until 1961-62, when it became very crowded on peak Sundays. The Sunday school in other rooms of the house was also very crowded. By the fall of 1962, we had selected a site for a new fellowship structure on Willow Road across from Park Place School. The existing house was to serve as the Sunday school building. By November, we had started to clear the site in the woods for the fellowship building. We were very careful not to destroy trees that we did not have to destroy. Stakes were put in. Stumps and other debris had to be cleared. Manpower was used, but also Jeep power, in this case Warren Davies' Jeep. This was very helpful in removing stumps. These were not the largest stumps. They had to be moved by use of block and tackle supplied by John Mumma. Ben Wood, our contractor, was engaged to put in the footings, do concrete work, put up the main framing, and a build-up roof. By February 23rd, we were starting our part of the construction. Ben Wood had done his job and the main framing was up. This was our first big day. Although Ben Wood had put up the main framing, it was our job to do the entire job, including the framing on the vestibule. Ed Hoffman, Ken Lambert, and Dick Peterson starting in on some of the framing of the vestibule. Meanwhile, John Mumma prepares to cut a very exact angle, part of the framing for the very acute angle corner of the vestibule, which has since become known as Mumma's Corner. It was our job also to put up the plywood roofing. Ben Wood, the contractor, came in later, put on the roofing felt, and built up roofing material. On this day, the roofing crew, in very cold weather, enjoyed the sun, and things moved along very well. This is a view of the vestibule construction from the vantage point of the roof crew. The weather forecast that day was for cold and a 90% chance of snow. It was cold, but it wasn't snowing. Things moved along so smoothly that John Mumma and Dick Peterson, who were running the job, were very pleased, and all of us were very enthusiastic. We now thought that we could really do what John Mumma had told us we could do. And we thought this already looked very much like a church building. By later standards, that wasn't quite true, but that's the way we felt at the time. February 24th, forecast clear and cold. That's the day we got the snow that we should have gotten on Saturday. But the snow didn't seem to bother anybody. We went right on working, a very large crew again. As a matter of fact, we sort of enjoyed it all. Bill Severance and Wink Winkle putting in nailers. We were already putting up insulated siding. Jim Stopps and Brad Brown putting up siding. This was a lot of ladder work. Other people were working on other parts of the building. Later on, we used a lot of scaffolds. These were much better to work on than ladders. Brisk nailing helped keep warm that day. Warren Davies working on some of the Sunday school building modifications. Most of the interior remodeling on the Sunday school was being done by the ladies of the church simultaneously with this operation. This is now March the 2nd. Things are still going well. It's gotten a little bit warmer. Here comes Mrs. Trumbore and the children. See what's going on. They found out Conrad Trumbore, professor, PhD, has nailed a ladder into the structure. It's a tough job to get it out. Rick Laufman, engineer, can hardly believe it. John Mumma says, move the ladder over, Conrad, and you'll get a better bite on the nails. Then he realized what he said and went back to work on his corner. Finally, the ladder came out by brute strength. This is much better than having it nailed into the structure. Meanwhile, having given his advice, John puts the finishing touches on his framing for the acute angle, fighting limbs all the time. Warren Davies doing some work on the Sunday school building. This was a beautiful day, quite a bit warmer. Matter of fact, the ground was starting to thaw. This is March 3rd. Power tools came in very handy. We used a lot of skill saws, saber saws, and later on a table saw. Dr. Trumbore, Ken Lambert, and mud. This was really something. The ground had thawed and it was impossible to walk anywhere without getting a big deposit of very slippery mud on the bottoms of your shoes. This was a great problem for people who had to work on ladders and scaffolds. The whole area was muddy. At one time someone had said that our lot was so beautiful that maybe we should call our fellowship the Unitarian Fellowship in the Woods. This day Brad Brown said, well, he didn't think that was appropriate. We should call it the Unitarian Fellowship in the Swamp. Nevertheless, mud or not, on this 3rd day of March, 1963, construction went along very well indeed. Mud, mud, mud. But not everybody was muddy. Here's a little leaf gatherer. March 9th. We had started by this time to put up redwood siding. We were all impressed with the beauty of this wood. We had selected it because we thought it would be beautiful and the vertical lines would blend in with the woods. We had no idea how gorgeous it would really be until we saw it. John Mumma and Dick Peterson planned all the details, but once in a while there was one detail they hadn't planned, so they worked out the problem on the spot. Ned Herman nailing on siding. Will Aist also nailing on siding. Mrs. Trumbore's come back to see if there are any more ladders in the structure. We were using scaffolds by this time. They were too big to nail in. Alan Duff and Rick Laufman, engineer. Oops. We had some help from the junior department. Robert Herman puts wood life on redwood, an elderly car's hoods being used as a workbench by Will Aist. John Mumma figures out another little detail, then calls a conference to tell us about the beauty of redwood and that we shouldn't put any hammer marks on it. You shouldn't scratch it, drop it, step on it, drop anything on it. In short, be careful. Saturday, March 16th. Made a special effort to get out a big crew because we had a lot of aluminum foil insulation to put up on the inside. Our contractor was there. A slight disagreement. Our electrical work got started. Rick Laughlin was in charge of it, but we only had 3 people in the whole crew. This actually set us back quite a bit. St. Patrick's Day, however, the next day, after a speech or 2 at church, brought out, at least in the afternoon, a very large crew. We had to skip most of the aluminum foil insulation for the time being and went ahead with siding and other outside work. We did put up the wall insulation on the vestibule on St. Patrick's Day. The inside was just as muddy as the outside. There's the electricians working. There's the mud on the inside. It was difficult to find a footing for a ladder. We had to bring big planks in for support. What a quagmire. But the electrical work went ahead anyway. They did a beautiful job. Redwood against the clear blue sky always made a fine picture. Will Aist had figured out that the way to help the mud problem was to get rid of the water, which was now filling all the trenches for the step footings and was inside the structure. So he got a pump and pumped and pumped and pumped. We managed later on to get some of the young men in the fellowship, some of the boys interested in pumping, and they pumped and pumped and pumped. And had, I think, a much better time than we did when we pumped and pumped and pumped. This was tar scraping and water pumping. Some of Dr. Stopp's surgical training being used on the tar problem. Moving scaffolds around was always a problem. They were very nice to work with, although we had to put concrete blocks under them most of the time to support them in the mud. What could be more appropriate on St. Patrick's Day than to find a snake? This was our first encounter with an after that frequent visitor. We came to enjoy this large black snake and regard it as a pet. It is probably still out in the woods somewhere, but don't be afraid of it. The snake is now a Unitarian. This is Bruce Curran, also a Unitarian. And this is spring. Spring is here at last on March 23rd. It was a beautiful day. It felt like spring. The birds were out. We saw our first robins. Rabbits were all over the place. We went back to work on the siding. Siding was really beginning to shape up now. Good progress. Still a little yard work to be done though. We had scaffolds. We were working on the overhang, putting nailers and siding in up over the windows. Dave Guerin shows us how it's done. Electricians worked in the dark to give us light. We had frequent visits from neighborhood. Notice how all the printing on the siding is upright. Someone told us that this proves the structure was built by amateurs. No responsible professional workman would ever worry about putting the lettering upright on the insulated sheathing. Some of the visitors were from our own group. This is March 30th. We're getting ready to pour concrete. These plank walkways have been put in so the concrete can be hauled to the structure. We had to remove some of this to put up the scaffolds. By this time, the structure was really beginning to look like a fellowship house. There must be somebody in there. Here he comes. This is the 31st day of March. Warren Davies is getting ready to work on the fire escape for the Sunday school. He has finished doing work inside which was necessary to legally allow the Sunday school building to be used as a Sunday school. March 31st was a beautiful warm spring day, and we had something new added. Mr. Clevens had brought a table saw which was used from there on out and which proved to be a very great help, facilitating the work enormously. The electricians were going hard at their wiring now. Looks like they may have an electrician built into the structure up there. By April 6th, the forms for the steps were in. We had another architect brought in by John Mumma. It's Mr. Christopher Mumma. Marshall Knappen comes by to check on progress, to survey the situation. This is Chris Mumma's friend. She agrees that it's going along well. Rick Laufman checks the wiring specifications. The floor inside is now filled and tamped and covered with polyethylene sheet and wire and ready for concrete. Structure looks very, very good. Marshall Knappen confers with people, and here Chris Mumma and friend Jim Fields. Marshall Knappen talks with John Mumma. Everybody's getting in his 2 cents worth. April 12th, the steps now have been poured, and troweling was being carried out. Inside, the vestibule floor was also poured, and the inside steps had been done. We're getting ready now to the concrete in the main room. Big concrete slab. This power wheelbarrow was quite an attraction. We spent some time watching this operation, but we were also working on the outside of the building while this was going on the inside. This is Ben Wood's crew spreading concrete in the main slab. This was quite a job to put this big slab in. It's a concrete mixer and the power wheelbarrow. Coloring was added to the concrete. And then this was troweled over and over and over again with this large machine troweler. Notice how little aluminum foil insulation is up on the wall. Then April 14th, Easter. This day we don't have many pictures, but we had a crew that worked hard at insulation. These, however, are the ladies of the church working on the Sunday school building interior. We didn't get many pictures of them, unfortunately, because the lighting was very poor and our equipment was also poor. April 27th, the work crew sat around outside in the warm spring weather and had lunch. We usually had soup at lunch, almost always, and we usually had it inside of the Sunday school building, but this day was so beautiful we had it outside. People in the fellowship took turns making soup, and we had some of the best soup ever consumed by humankind. Warren Davies, Fellowship House, resplendent in the spring weather. April 28th, Moving Day. We asked everyone to take a few items from the church in their cars after the service on April 28th to the new building. Everybody did this, and we moved very painlessly and very quickly. Not everyone helped. Some people were playing tag, but we had wonderful cooperation. There goes our lectern. And Louise Keeney is taking the model of our new church. There's Brad Brown. All kinds of things moving. What amazing cooperation. In no time at all, our meeting room was virtually bare. Cars moved over to the new site, and soon the sight of our new fellowship house thrilled everyone. All the furniture and fixtures showed up. Looks great. Looks just wonderful. But inside, painting is still going on. This is a result of that one day when we had such a small work crew and couldn't get our insulation up in time. We had agreed to get out of our other building at 101 Cypher Drive by May 1st. we now knew that we had made it. John Mumma had told us that we could do something that many of us in the fellowship did not think we could do. He had inspired us, led us, and now we had done it. It was a good feeling. This film was produced by Ned Herman in 1963. Video adaptation by Ridge Amos of Video Works Television Productions of Newark, Delaware, 1990.